This Intel NUC is the fastest mini PC that I have tested on the channel so far. Here we have a little sneak peek at the performance. This is Cinebench R23, the multi-core test, and we're getting over 12,000 points. And on this chart you can see all the other mini PCs that we have tested on the channel and how this one compares. I was contacted by a company, GEEKNUC. They wanted me to test this machine and produce a video, so here we are. Let's see what it can do. There are many versions of the Intel NUC, so you need to be a little bit careful to get the right model. This is the Intel NUC 13 Pro Arena Canyon, and it is the tall version, meaning you can install an additional 2.5-inch SATA drive, as well as there's an expansion bay here. You can upgrade USB and Ethernet ports. The configuration, we have an i7-1360P, we have 32 GB of RAM and a 1 TB NVMe SSD. Let's have a look what's inside the box. We of course get the mini PC right here, and then we get a VESA mounting bracket. So this lets you install a mini PC at the back of a TV or a monitor. We're also getting a Core i7 sticker. Some of you really like these to stick it to the monitor or onto the machine. There is some paperwork right here, and we're also getting a set of screws. These are for the VESA mounting bracket, but also to upgrade the internal storage. We'll have a look at that later. And here we have the power supply. Nice quality. You're looking at 120 watt, so pretty decent. At the front, 2 USB ports, both can do 10 gigabits, so that means copying at over 900 megabytes a second if you have a capable USB storage device. This one can charge a little bit faster, it supports more current. RTTS connector for your headset, headphones, power button with power LED. There's a lot going on at the back. Here goes the power supply. In total, we can connect 4 displays, 2 with the Thunderbolt 4 USB 4 ports and another 2 with the HDMI ports. So we can use 4 monitors, 4 TVs running at 4K 60. With the Thunderbolt 4 USB 4 ports, there are a lot of specifications. It's very detailed, so I refer to the user manual, put it on the screen. It can support up to 40 gigabytes of data transfer when transmitting and up to 20 gigabits when receiving. We're getting 2.5 gigabit Ethernet provided by a chipset from Intel, which is wonderful. 2 USB ports, the top one 10 gigabit, the bottom one is USB 2, only does 480 megabits. So this is where I connect the dongle for wireless mouse and keyboard. And down here we have an expansion bay. I couldn't get a whole lot of information or products available, but apparently you can install things like additional USB ports down here. And over here we have a Kensington lock for security to tie the machine down to your desk or to the floor. And now I think it's time to open up the machine and take a look what's inside. 4 screws that we need to open to remove this panel. Here we go. Let's carefully lift this up and make sure we're not pulling any wires that might be connected. Yep, there's one wire here, so let's take a closer look. This is where you install an additional 2.5-inch SATA drive, can be mechanical or can be an SSD, so very nice to get some cheap, affordable storage into this machine. Here we can see the RAM. Let me just grab this module and we're taking a closer look. What have we got here? So it's a module from Kingston, okay. DDR4, 3200 megahertz, and I ran HW info to see what the timings are. We have a CL of 22. This is the NVMe SSD the machine came with. Let's pull it up and see the details. So again, yeah, it's a model from Kingston, PCI Express 4 NVMe. I will put the crystal disk mark results on the screen, and as far as I have been able to verify, performance is excellent. And this is a nice surprise. Here you can install a SATA SSD, but it has to be of the 8842 form factor. On the main board there are quite a few interesting aspects. See this yellow jumper? This one configures settings to do with the BIOS. So there's a default setting, which is normal operation, but then you can set it to a lockdown mode where you can't enter the BIOS or change the boot order and things like that. And a third setting lets you do a BIOS recovery in case the BIOS flash went wrong. This is the front panel header connector, and what this jumper does, it lets you reset the Intel Management Engine BIOS. And over here we have two internal USB 2 ports. The machine comes with Windows 11 Pro pre-installed, and there's no license key. The license key is embedded in the firmware. You just connect to the internet and everything gets registered and authenticated automatically. The next thing was I connected to my wireless home network and I'm running all the Windows updates, making sure that we have all the latest drivers. But because this is an Intel machine with Intel chipsets and processors, you also need to go to the Intel website and get the Intel Driver and Support Assistance program. This one will find later versions for the graphics, for the Bluetooth, and even a BIOS update. And one more setting I'm changing, I'm setting the performance profile to high performance because we want to make sure we're getting optimal performance. I had a look in the BIOS, and this machine being from Intel, it is quite conservative, so you're not going to find anything to do with overclocking. We have the usual settings for the integrated resources. Some of the more interesting aspects is the first one, there is a fan speed profile. So the fan will turn off completely if you're not doing anything, but out of the box, this doesn't happen too often and the fan will turn on quite frequently. But you can change the fan speed profile to quiet and then the fan will not rotate at all for a longer periods of time. I also found an interesting setting to enable a virtual monitor. So this can come in handy if you want to use the machine in a headless setup to remote into it through the network. You can do that without having to buy a HDMI virtual monitor dongle. The processor is from Intel's latest 13th generation and we have heaps of cores. We have 4 performance cores including hyperthreading and then another 8 efficiency cores with 8 threads. So all up 12 cores and 16 threads. I always like to run Cinebench including the older versions so it's easier to compare with historic figures. In R15 we are getting 2137 for the multi-core and 274 for the single core test. In Cinebench R20 we're getting 4814 for the multi-core and 734 for the single core test. And in Cinebench R23 I already hinted at the performance in the beginning of the video. We're getting 12,563 for the multi-core and 1914 for the single core test. And here we have again the benchmark results for Cinebench R23, the multi-core test and how it compares to all the other mini PCs that I've been testing on the channel. And here another chart, this one is the single core test and again we can see that this Intel NUC is the fastest machine I have tested. Running a benchmark doesn't tell you the whole story. You need to run it for a little bit longer to keep an eye out on power consumption, temperatures, clock speeds and fan speed. So I used HW Info to log the data and ran Cinebench R23 for around 12 minutes. And here we have a graph showing the clock frequencies. We can see the performance cores at the top. So they're running between 3 and 3.25 gigahertz. And at the bottom we can see the efficiency cores. They're running just under 2.5 gigahertz. Temperatures for the processor were around 75 degrees. The fan speed between 3400 and 3800 RPM. And using a power meter, I measured around 60 watts of power consumption for the entire machine. Running Cinebench R23 in the single core test, we can see that the cores, the frequency seems to be bouncing around. And what happens is that the load is being passed from core to core. We are looking at the performance cores here. And initially, it's closer to the 5 gigahertz, but then as the test continues, it drops down to around 4.5 gigahertz, fluctuating between these two speeds. Temperatures were again in the 70s with the fan running around 3400 RPM and with the power meter I saw 41 watts of power consumption for the entire machine. You might think that Intel integrated graphics is not that great, but this is one of the higher end implementations. Intel Iris Xe graphics with 96 execution cores. And yeah, let's run some benchmarks. We have CloudGate 25,212, and here we've got the next benchmark. This is Skydiver 16,487. And then we have Night Raid, we're getting 18,926. And of course, Firestrike 4,909. I put together another chart with the Firestrike results of all the mini PCs that we've been testing in the past. And again, yeah, this one tops the chart, just edging out on some of the previous higher end mini PCs. Let's have a look at some games, and you already know what's coming. Dirt 3 is my favorite racing game, and it's the first game I usually test to make sure everything is working, MSI Afterburner is up and running, and so on. We are testing with very high details at first, and we're getting over 100 FPS. That is absolutely beautiful. And I go into the settings and change the details to Ultra. I wanted to see if I can handle that. And yes, we're getting around 60 FPS. Sometimes it drops a little bit under 60, but not too often. So yes, gaming performance is actually pretty decent. Strange Brigade is another game I like to test. This one uses the Vulkan API, and it is very optimized. It doesn't really need a fancy processor. It will run on a potato as long as you have a decent graphics card. And we are running at 1080p with the low details, and we're getting between 40 and 50 FPS. So also very playable. If you want to hit those 60 FPS, you might have to lower the resolution a little bit in this game, but at 1080p to run this game so well is pretty impressive. Shadow of the Tomb Raider is next. This one is more demanding, representing a AAA game. Not really the latest and greatest, but it is still quite demanding, and most YouTube channels like using it for testing. We're running at 1080p with the lowest details, and we're getting around 30 FPS. Now, this is one of those games that supports the Intel XeSS upscaling technology. So I'm going into the settings, enabling that feature, and now we're getting around FPS in the 40s. So a nice improvement. But does it run Crysis? So here we have Crysis running at 1080p. All the details are cranked up, and this is the DirectX 10 render path with the 64-bit version. The game runs fairly well, but every now and then we do hit some major stutters and hiccups. And this is one of the challenges with the Intel graphics. They are fairly good with DirectX 12 and Vulkan with the latest API, but legacy support with older titles can be hit and miss. There are some workarounds. You can use like a DirectX to Vulkan wrapper, but in Crysis that doesn't work. So it does run Crysis, but not that well. So on this machine, if you want to play games, you're better off sticking to more modern titles. So we have a mini PC with very good single core performance, and recently I've been looking into emulators like PCM and 86box, and those emulators need a high single thread, single core performance. So yeah, I think this machine has enough power. So I set up 86box with a Pentium 2 running at 266 megahertz. We have 256 megabytes of RAM and a 3DFX Voodoo 3 video card. And then I installed Windows 98, like I do on my other projects. It's a fairly smooth workflow, and yeah, using the emulator, it's very similar to using the real thing. You get the BIOS and everything, so it actually was quite interesting. And yeah, look at that. It seems to be running things quite well. There's no audio sound stuttering when you first boot into Windows, which is an indicator that it might struggle. And you can see the there's a percentage at the top of the screen telling you how the CPU is going. If it drops below 100, then it's struggling. But this machine had no issues keeping that figure at 100%, and runs everything well. Now, some of the games I'm showing and tested, they're a bit too much for Pentium 2 266, but it was just a demonstration. So yes, for emulation, this machine will be outstanding because it's got heaps of threads, so it's really strong with multi-threading, but it also has very strong cores with excellent performance for those single-threaded emulators. Home networking is a big topic, and if you're doing any sort of content creation and dealing with large media files, you want to have fast connection to your home network. And yeah, this machine is awesome. We're getting chipsets from Intel. We get an Intel 2.5 gigabit Ethernet port, so that means you can copy data at around 270 megabytes per second. And also we're getting Intel Wi-Fi 6E. Now I'm using a Xiaomi router. It can do Wi-Fi 6, not quite 6E, but even here I'm getting very good performance, around 80 megabytes per second, and that is upstairs. The router is downstairs in the kitchen, so it's quite far away, and comparing to the other mini PCs, this is also the fastest result I've seen. So the performance is excellent, the features are also very nice, and we're getting Intel build quality, reliability and compatibility. So let's talk about the pricing. GEEKNUC, they have their own website, but they're also selling mini PCs through their Amazon store. I will put links down below in the video description. At the time of shooting this video, you're looking at $999 US for the tall version with the i7-1360P, 32 gigs of RAM, 1 terabyte of storage. And for you guys, we have a coupon, $100 off. Check the details down below in the video description. If anything changes with stock or pricing, I will also update the video description, because that's how things go. You produce a video, but then things change. So guys, you can tell that I'm pretty happy with this mini PC. In terms of performance, it's topping all the benchmark charts, and it's outperforming all the other mini PCs that we have tested so far. And it's fast in both multi-threaded and single-threaded performance, so it doesn't really matter what you do, you will get excellent performance. The Intel graphics, usually, not as good as AMD, but this is the high-end version with 96 execution cores, and yeah, excellent. So you can run modern games if you dial down the settings, or maybe the resolution a little bit, or you don't play the absolute latest and greatest. It would be perfectly fine for running some of the older games, your backlog games from your huge Steam library that you haven't touched in ages. The Intel driver can be a challenge with some of the older games, but we can use a wrapper that translates between DirectX to Vulkan that can fix some of those older games if you're having issues with the frame pacing. Where I see this machine doing really well is emulation. It has no problem doing PlayStation and DOSBox. That's one of my favorite emulators, so to speak, but it also can handle more demanding things like PCM or 86box, which can struggle even on modern Ryzen processors that might not have the latest and greatest single-threaded performance. So yeah, thumbs up from me. Let me know what do you think about this mini PC, and if you have any requests, feedback, comments, please leave them down below. I read every single comment. And that's it for this video, guys. There will be more mini PCs in the future, so stay tuned. But of course, we will continue with our regular retro PC playing classic games on old computers. Those videos will not go anywhere. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. I shall see you soon with another one.